And you would have heard, of course, about the Australian National University here rejecting a well-funded proposal to have a centre for the study of Western civilisation. Now, they would never knock back a centre for Islamic studies or Asian studies. In fact, they have both those centres. Why is it that in Western civilisation now, well, sure, the very essence of what we've developed in the West really is the fact that we should be free to be self-critical. Of course we should be self-critical, but why are we self-critical to that extent, where we won't even celebrate our own civilisation? Are we racked by guilt for our success?
That's a really good question. Well, I think it is partly a consequence of that proclivity for self-criticism that's developed to an intense degree in the West. But I also think it's a consequence of the incautious subsidization of radical viewpoints for the last 50 years. You know, and we've had a critique of Western culture generated by the radical leftists since the time of Marx, an incredibly discredited perspective, as far as I'm concerned, that's resulted in the suffering and deaths of at least 100 million people in the last century, but constant drum banging for the validity of the Marxist critique of Western hierarchies, and an insistence, certainly generated in large part by the radical disciplines in the university, that Western culture is nothing but a corrupt patriarchy, and that anyone who has any ambition, young men and women included, is essentially acting out the role of junior tyrant. And I think it's an appalling doctrine, and I think it's fundamentally misguided with regards to helping the dispossessed as well, because what we're seeing around the world is an absolute miracle in terms of economic development now that the communist countries have been defeated and there isn't so much pressure on developing countries to produce socialist economies or communist economies. We're seeing unbelievable wealth being generated all around the world. And so I do think it's you made reference to the university situation there in Australia and the refusal to fund the Centre for the Study of Western Civilization, and I think that's absolutely typical. We got some things truly right in the West. The emphasis on individual rights and responsibilities, mostly on responsibility, the emphasis on private property and free markets and free trade and all of that, that's the way out of poverty for the masses of people in the world. And we've seen that demonstrated unequivocally over the last 15 years. We've halved the rate of absolute poverty in the world in the last 15 years. And that's a consequence of the spread of Western ideas.
Absolutely. We should be proud of it.
It is an incredible achievement.
We should be proud of it, not ashamed of it. We're almost completely out of time. God, I'd love to have a beer with you for a few hours next time you're in Australia. But just very quickly, Jordan Peterson.